Hello NFL fans, welcome to NFL Picks with Dave. Hope all of you are enjoying the summer weather. Today we're going to predict how the NFC will shape up this football season. As many of you guys know, the NFL has extended the regular season by one game. This means that each team will now have to play 17 games. This new change also has impacted the preseason, which has shrunk by one game. This change will give each team more opportunities to make it to the playoffs. Let's now predict the NFC. Our first prediction takes us to the NFC South, where the defending Super Bowl champion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, reside with the Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, and the New Orleans Saints. Let's start with the Carolina Panthers. Last year, things weren't great for them. They finished with a 5-11 record and were in third place in their division. During this offseason, they got Sam Darnold from the New York Jets, which is why I'm giving them a 5-12 record. This will be good for last place in the South. Let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta last year had a miserable season with a record of 4-12. Head coach Dan Quinn was fired along with general manager Thomas Dimitroff after Week 5. This last offseason, they hired Arthur Smith as their new head coach and Terry Fontenot as their new general manager. Since the Falcons hired a new head coach, I don't expect them to make it to the playoffs, but I predict that they'll improve their record to 8-9, which is good for third place in their division. Our next NFC South team is the New Orleans Saints. Last season, they had a good year with a record of 12-4. They defeated the Chicago Bears in the wild card round with a score of 21-9. Unfortunately, the Saints were defeated in the divisional round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a score of 30-20. During this last offseason, future Hall of Famer Drew Brees retired from football, which is why I'm predicting the Saints will no longer be the NFC South's powerhouse. I predict that they'll finish with an 8-9 record and have the tiebreaker over Atlanta. Our final NFC South team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year, they finished with a record of 11-5, which earned them a wildcard spot in the playoffs. In the playoffs, they surprised everyone, including me, by defeating Washington, the Saints, and the Green Bay Packers to advance to Super Bowl 55, where they defeated the Kansas City Chiefs with a score of 31-9 to clinch their first title since the 2002 season. They were also the first wildcard team since the 2010 Green Bay Packers to advance to the Super Bowl and win it. Another cool fact is the Buccaneers were the first team in NFL history to host the Super Bowl on their home field. Since the Bucs will have an easy schedule this year, I predict that they will finish with a record of 14-3 for the division title and the NFC's #1 seed. They're also one of my favorite teams to go to this year's Super Bowl. Let's now go to the NFC East, where the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles, the New York Giants, and the Washington football team clash. Our first East Coast team will be the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, they had a season of misery, finishing with a record of 4-11-1, and were in last place in their awful division. During this last offseason, they fired head coach Doug Peterson and hired Nick Sirianni as their new head coach. They also traded away quarterback Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts. Since they hired a new coach and have a different quarterback, I'm going to give them a 5-12 record, which is good for last place in the NFC East. Our next team will be the New York Giants. Last season, they finished with a record of 6-10, which was surprisingly good for second place in their division. Since they don't really have a good quarterback, I'm going to give them a 7-10 record, which is good enough for third place in the division. Our next NFC East team will be the Washington football team. Last season, Washington finished with a 7-9 record and were crowned the NFC East champions. In the playoffs, they were eliminated by the Buccaneers with a score of 31-23. During this offseason, quarterback Alex Smith retired and was named the Comeback Player of the Year after he bounced back from his awful leg injury in 2018. Ryan Fitzpatrick is their most notable new quarterback. Since Fitzmagic is part of their team, I'm going to give them a record of 8-9, which is good for second place in the NFC East. Our final NFC East team is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas last year finished with a record of 6-10, which was good for third place in the East. Since Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott are set to return this year, I'm going to give Dallas a record of 10-7, which is good for the NFC East title and the 4th seed in the NFC playoffs. Our next division takes us to the northern part of the country, where the Bears, Packers, Lions, and Vikings live. Our first team is the Detroit Lions. Last season, Detroit had an awful year. They finished with a record of 5-11 and were in last place in their division. They fired head coach Matt Patricia during the season, and their general manager Bob Quinn was also given the boot. During this offseason, the Lions traded longtime quarterback Matthew Stafford to the Los Angeles Rams in exchange for quarterback Jared Goff. Since the Lions have a new coaching staff, I'm going to give them a record of 6-11. Our next team is the Chicago Bears. The Bears last season finished with a record of 8-8 and were able to sneak into the playoffs as the 7th seed. During this last offseason, Mitchell Trubisky left to join the Bills and was replaced by Andy Dalton. Since the Bears don't really have a good quarterback, I'm going to give them a 7-10 record. Our next team is the Minnesota Vikings. Last season, Minnesota finished in 3rd place in the North with a record of 7-9 and missed the playoffs. During the offseason, they released tight end Kyle Rudolph and kicker Dan Bailey. Kirk Cousins, however, is still on the team, which is why I'm giving them a 9-8 record. Our final NFC North team is the Green Bay Packers. Last season, they finished with a 13-3 record. In the playoffs, they defeated the Los Angeles Rams with a score of 32-18, only to be defeated by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the following week. During the offseason, the team had some drama with star quarterback Aaron Rodgers. However, Rodgers came back to the team, and the two parties revised the star quarterback's contract. Since the Packers had a good season last year, and their star quarterback returned, I'm going to give them a 13-4 record, the 3rd seed in the playoffs, and the NFC North title. However, if more drama between Rodgers and the team resurfaces during the season, and the quarterback sits out for the rest of the season, the Vikings will become my new favorite team to win the division. Our final division takes us to the West Coast, where the NFC West teams, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Rams live. Our first Western team is the Cardinals. Arizona last year finished with a record of 8-8 and narrowly missed the playoffs. During the offseason, they acquired longtime Texans defensive end J.J. Watt. I also predict that the Cardinals' quarterback Kyler Murray will also become better and more competitive. Since Arizona acquired Watt, I'm going to give them a record of 10-7, which is good for 4th place in the NFC West and for the 7th seed in the playoffs. Our next team is the Los Angeles Rams. Last season, they finished with a record of 10-6. In the playoffs, they defeated the Seahawks in an upset with a score of 30-20. However, they got frozen by the Packers in the tundra the following week. During the offseason, they acquired Matthew Stafford from Detroit. Since Stafford is prone to injury, I'm going to give the Rams a record of 12-5, which is good for 3rd place and 6th seed in the playoffs. Our next team is the Seattle Seahawks. Last season, they finished with a record of 12-4 and won the first NFC West title since 2016. However, they lost to the Rams during the wild card round of the playoffs, which was their first home playoff loss since the 2004 season. During the offseason, the team, like the Packers, had drama with star quarterback Russell Wilson. Eventually, the two sides worked it out and Wilson stayed with the team. The team also hired Shan Waldron as their new offensive coordinator after Brian Schottenheimer was fired by the team. Since the Seahawks kept their quarterback and got a new offensive coordinator, I'm going to give them a 12-5 record, edging out the Los Angeles Rams for second place and the 5th seed of the playoffs. Our final NFC team is the San Francisco 49ers. Last season, San Francisco had a season of bad luck. They were in last place in the division with a record of 7-9 after losing many key players to injury. Since the team has a good defense, I'm going to give them a record of 13-4 for the division crown and the second seed in the playoffs. And that does it for today's episode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest videos and posts I do. Also, be sure to like and follow this channel's Facebook page. What's your NFC predictions? Let me know in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you again soon.